Daniel Theis of the Boston Celtics is the starting center who anchored the 4th-ranked defense based on defensive rating for the 2019-2020 NBA season. Nonetheless, over the course of the last 2 seasons, Theis has been much maligned for his diminutive stature and perceived lack of defensive impact. Contrarily, Theis has quietly become one of the better defenders in the NBA. While he doesn't impact the game at a level of defensive titans like Rudy Gobert or Brook Lopez, his versatility in a variety of different defensive coverages and schemes serve to help amplify Coach Stevens' defensive game plan. Much of Theis' impact is felt on the defensive end. Standing at 6'8" with a modest wingspan of 7 foot, Daniel Theis does not possess oppressive length like a Jarrett Allen, who is capable of taking the entire paint away. Using the 2019-2020 NBA statistics provided by basketballreference.com, Theis' block percentage of 5% actually ranked 8th in all qualifying centers. While this isn't an entirely accurate reflection of good rim protection, he is still a few echelons below from lengthy paint protectors like Mitchell Robinson, who stands at 8%, Miles Turner at 6.4%, Brook Lopez at 7.9%, and more. Theis' ability to block shots come more so from his mobility in tracking smaller guards streaking to the hoop or helping early. In this play, Theis is in drop position while Hayward is supposed to encourage Augustine to use the screen. Augustine rejects the screen, and Theis is actually nimble enough to sink down and block the shot. While not the most intimidating help defender, Theis is very calculating when it comes to help defense. Here, Toronto is running one of their most common sets, the Siakam-Van Vliet inverted pick and roll. He is able to take away Gasol as a dump-off option while Brown contests Siakam's shot. Siakam pump fakes and gets Brown out of his shoes, but Theis is staying down the entire time. He is able to time the shot and block it. As the Boston Celtics move on from Al Horford, Theis has taken on a much larger role in protecting the rim, as the frequency of opponent shot attempts at the rim for the last 2 seasons were comparatively higher than the first 2 seasons. Overall, he has served as a decent rim protector, although a poor defense to start in 2020 has led to his worst mark in his career in small samples. Defensively, Daniel Theis' greatest strength comes from his versatility. While he is a good rim protector, he is an exquisite switch defender, buoyed by his impressive lateral quickness that allows him to keep up with guards. Despite his 245-pound frame, Theis fared well in switch situations. This quality is exhibited mostly in the Celtics pick and roll coverage. The Celtics like to drop or ice ball screens, and when this coverage breaks down as the on-ball defender, in this case Kemba Walker, is unable to recover onto the ball handler, DJ Augustine, Walker and Theis do a delayed switch. This is a good choice by the Celtics coaching staff as it makes use of Theis' perimeter defense and rim protection. Most notably, Theis' switching acumen was on display against Fred VanVleet during the 2020 Eastern Conference semifinals. Throughout the course of the 7-game series, VanVleet often found himself isolating against Daniel Theis on the perimeter. While Fred got a few plays over Theis, in general, Theis was effective. Even with his proficiency to stay with perimeter players, Theis can offer some resistance down low against post behemoths like Joel Embiid. However, former teammates like Enes Kanter were comparatively better in these situations. Additionally, Daniel Theis also demonstrates a high-level basketball IQ on defense. This tends to manifest itself in his defensive rotations, or sometimes in his choice to not help. On this VanVleet drive, Theis occupies the help position but does not jump to contest, as to not give up an easy offensive rebound to Anunoby. Similar idea here, where Theis is acting as the weak side help. Tatum and Brown are icing the pick and roll, with Tatum preventing Morant from using the screen, while Jaylen Brown drops to temporarily contain 2. Morant rejects the screen and attacks downhill. Brown, being in ice coverage, is able to actually contest Morant. Theis watches this all unfold and makes the prudent decision to cover Valanciunas on the roll instead of chasing the block. In this play, Siakam attacks downhill against Jaylen Brown in the middle of the floor. Instead of fully committing to Siakam's drive, Theis expertly positions himself in the gap between Gasol and Siakam. Therefore, when Siakam hits Gasol, Theis is right there to contest the mid-range jumper, probably the exact shot the Celtics were hoping for. Although Theis messes up on these reads occasionally, generally, Theis' successful reads generously offsets any of the points allowed from mistakes. Looking at the more vanilla drop and ice coverage the Celtics like to run, Daniel Theis does fairly well in these situations. In contrast to high-level paint protectors that use their length and size to swallow rim attacks like Brook Lopez in Coach Budenholzer's ball screen defense, Theis' speed allows him to be more aggressive on the perimeter. Because Theis is capable of containing perimeter threats, he has no qualms about playing super high on some of his drop coverages. This is a good counter against sharpshooting guards that can come off screens and shoot without much urgency. In this instance, Theis plays super high on the drop coverage because he knows that he could contain VanVleet going downhill or recover back onto Anunoby. He pressures so high that VanVleet gets called for a backcourt violation. Instead, more specialized rim protectors can be torched in these scenarios. In this play, Tatum comes off the screen and is pretty comfortably able to walk into a wide open mid-range jump shot. Overall, what we get with Daniel Theis is one of the most versatile centers in today's NBA. Not only is he capable of playing more traditional pick and roll coverages like drop and ice, but Theis also leverages his lateral quickness in switch scenarios, where he outclasses most centers. Compared to other defensive titan rim protectors, Theis doesn't completely neutralize the paint as an option for opposing offenses. However, Theis should not be treated as a defensive centerpiece. He is much more of a heavy contributor to Coach Stevens' game plan. His ability to switch with other wings and even guards allows Stevens to play his style of defense that emphasizes off-ball switching to avoid on-ball mismatches. Having a more traditional center in these spots will certainly not be viable. The Celtics' defense was on full display during their 2020 postseason push, as the Raptors and the 76ers experienced a major decrease in their offensive rating relative to their regular season marks when facing the Celtics. While the Heat experienced an increase in their offensive rating, Miami actually torched almost all their opponents over the course of the postseason. When looking at Miami Heat's offensive rating relative to each opponent, only the Lakers ranked above the Celtics. While the Lakers were likely the best defensive team in the 2019-2020 season, they also played against a Heat team without Goran Dragic, who was playing at an all-star level, and a healthy Bam Adebayo, who was injured and missed 2 games. Looking at impact metrics, Daniel Theis graded out extremely well. He had a defensive real plus-minus of 4.45. Project538's Raptor model had Theis as a moderately strong defender, below James Harden of all people. In Basketball Reference's defensive box plus-minus, Theis placed in the top 20. While there certainly are some variations in how these impact metrics graded Daniel Theis' defensive impact, the stats and the film generally suggest that Theis is a pretty strong defender. Theis' most glaring weakness as a player is his finishing. This encapsulates finishing as a roller, lob catcher, or as a stretch big. While Theis is capable of catching some lob passes in traffic, he is many levels behind his fellow teammate Robert Williams. Where Theis' lack of height hurts him the most is usually in instances finishing at the rim. His lack of length and height often makes it difficult for him to finish against opposing defenders. Additionally, he doesn't have the explosiveness to elevate above length at the rim. His use of floaters and short mid-range shots certainly add to his versatility, however it also serves to highlight his inability to finish through traffic at a high level. Theis doesn't miss a lot of shots. He had a 60.4% effective field goal percentage over the course of his career, but his lack of finishing it is reflected heavily in his shot that he does not take. Stretching out, Theis' ability to stretch the floor is a welcomed addition to his game. Although his accuracy from 3 is not high enough to pull on the defense in any meaningful way, defenses often don't have any issues helping off Theis, and his career 3-point conversion rate of 34.9% on low volume is not enough to justify defensive respect. While having this shot in his arsenal isn't detrimental in any way, the returns are marginal at best. One of the stronger aspects of Daniel Theis' game is his passing. This is an aspect that is heavily emphasized in Coach Stevens' offense, mostly reflected in their 5-out half-court sets that has Theis on top of the arc making decisions in handoff or reading split actions. In this instance, the Celtics start in their Princeton Shin series alignment that goes into Chicago action, a pin down into dribble handoff. Theis is able to roll free as a result and get the open dunk. Theis' passing is also reflected in his short roll passing, where he is comfortable handling the ball in a power play and passing to open shooters. In this play, the Raptors drop against Kemba. Kemba finds Theis on the short roll, who is able to catch the ball and immediately attack the basket. This triggers an automatic rotation by Siakam, and Theis is able to dish out the ball for damage. This short roll passing is typically strong against teams that choose to ballistic pick and roll. However, in this case, Vucevic hedges against Hayward while Theis slips the screen and is able to roll free. He is a good enough passer to find the open 3 on the 4-on-3 power play. While his lack of finishing ability is a glaring weakness, his offensive IQ certainly helps offset some of his offensive deficiencies. For example, in this play, the Raptors are denying a common action by the Celtics, the double drag screen on top. The Raptors essentially ice the first screener with the big. Marcus Smart chooses to reject the screen, but the wrinkle is having Theis roll to the rim with Smart. Daniel Theis also adds on some additional value in the forms of his activity and motor. This is reflected in his good offensive rebounding numbers, as he recorded a 9.7% offensive rebounding percent, which is good for 16th in the league during the 2019-2020 NBA season. The film shows that he is rather sneaky in getting inside position for offensive rebounds, even against larger opponents. This is a skill that certainly scales well and carries value on higher level teams. Theis also has a high motor. When he sees a slower big going up the floor, he can occasionally beat them down the floor for easy buckets. Individually, we can reasonably come to the conclusion that Theis is not a particularly strong offensive player. However, in Coach Stevens' system, Theis actually becomes quite decent, with his strengths magnified. For example, he is often taken out of a self-generated scoring role by being surrounded by strong scorers. Additionally, to mitigate some of his finishing woes, Coach Stevens has also chosen to use him in deep steal screens to counter drop coverages, letting Brown waltz into the finish. Looking at impact metrics, the stats somewhat disagree. ESPN's Real Plus Minus depicts a rather weak player overall with an offensive RPM of -1.42. Project538's Raptor rating has him as a moderately ineffectual offensive player, with a rating of -0.9. Curiously, Basketball Reference's BPM model ranks him as a moderately impactful offensive player, with an offensive box plus minus of 0.6. The film seems to suggest that Theis isn't a great offensive player in a vacuum with his weak finishing and self-generated scoring ability. Nevertheless, playing in the Celtics offense, where those downsides are mitigated and his offensive strengths, like his passing and IQ and screening actions, are magnified, Theis actually becomes a decent piece. So while the Celtics system could be making Theis look better than he truly is as a player, his skill set actually allows Coach Stevens to play a specific style on offense and defense that leads to greater team efficiency. I hope all that was informative for you in some way. Thank you for watching.